And then you have the Fani Willis, or as she would say, Fani, F-A-N-I, but Fani. And she hired somebody, knew the person long before this horrible prosecution took place. And she went out and she paid him an unbelievable amount of money, more money than he ever had dreamt possible, much more money than other people that do that for a living. He never did it at all, had no experience in it at all. And they had obviously a conflict. We don't have to go into that, but they were able to get a lot of money because it was a high-profile person. Me, I'm a very high-profile person. So they were able to pay him close to $1 million when he was not equipped to do the job, and she's not equipped to do the job, and that case should end immediately. That case is so conflicted, nobody's ever seen anything like it. And then you have deranged Jack Smith, who's a Trump hater and represents all the Trump haters, and he's going wild. He's just a wild man. He's been overturned unanimously by the Supreme Court. Went after other people over the years. He's had great failure. But he's mean, he's nasty, he's unfair. And the judges on these cases, they're all Trump haters. Other than we have maybe one or two that I think can be fair. But you look at New York, what's happened. I mean, these people have tremendous hatred. You can't do this to a president. And again, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about in the future. A president has to be free. A president has to be, if the president does a good job. I did. Some people would say a great job.
Okay. The White House has not had any coordination with the DOJ on the prosecutions regarding Donald Trump. This is totally separate. It's a special counsel. The special counsel decided to bring charges. In terms of the Fani Willis stuff, I believe that Nathan Wade testified he was making more money before he started to work for Fani Willis down there. Let's go back to Garrett Haake in West Palm Beach and Ken Delaney, who's outside of the Supreme Court. Also, New York Times chief White House correspondent Peter Baker. Why didn't he come out with a prepared statement? Why this? Why going back to the battle days of Trump, where he just comes out with a word salad and, whatever comes to mind and whatever allegation he can toss out?
That's a great question, Katie, and one that I'll be trying to answer today. Donald Trump has displayed more discipline over the course of this campaign than some of his previous ones in these moments. Not really what you saw here today. Clearly not a prepared statement, clearly not especially focused on the ruling today, but I think goes to the point that he sort of looks at all of these cases holistically, and he tries to argue that they're all related. He's trying to make the case that somehow this is all coordinated by the White House to go after him, and taking advantage of the fact that he's going to have a lot of eyeballs on him because of the Colorado ruling today. But this is it, right? I think you heard there one of the things that I think was most clear was related to the point that Ken made earlier, this idea that arguing that he shouldn't be prosecuted for things. He didn't mention any of the things related to January 6th. He was making a case that he shouldn't be prosecuted for going after ISIS or General Soleimani, the Iranian general who he killed when he was president. Those are not the things that he is being prosecuted for. So trying to project out a little bit of, protection for himself rhetorically as these cases advance, and trying to draw people into the idea that somehow all of these things are part of a massive conspiracy to stop him from being elected president.
Ken, jump in.
Yeah. Garrett's absolutely right. What he's doing is he's grasping at the legitimate argument that there are some cases where perhaps a president should be immune based on the decisions that he or she makes, and he's sort of trying to embrace that argument and use that as a shield. And he's, again, talking about drone strikes that he argued, targeted killings, which, by the way, were not even controversial under law. When people talk about that, whether drone strikes being controversial, they talk about Barack Obama's decision to kill an American citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki. But there was nothing about taking out the leader of ISIS or an Iranian general was remotely illegal under U.S. law. But, yeah, I mean, nothing about his conduct in trying to overturn the election or with regard to classified documents. And it appears that he's hoping that the Supreme Court will issue this blanket immunity, get out of jail free card for presidents. Remember, his lawyers in that appeals court argued that a president could order an assassination of his political opponents and could not be prosecuted unless he was first impeached. That was their argument. That's what they hope the Supreme Court holds. Most legal experts don't think that's how it's going to come out.
Peter, let me ask you about what he continues to say, which is that President Biden ordered this prosecution. This is a political hit job. Explain again how this prosecution came to be. Or these
Yeah, obviously
by
that's
the
not
way,
true.
he's not even talking about Colorado, which is the case that was decided today. He's now bringing this to the classified documents, the January 6th election interference case, the Fonnie Willis case, et cetera.
Yeah, it's what Garrett said. He conflates all of them into a single overarching deep state conspiracy to get him, and that has some resonance, at least among his base. But you're right. The White House has had nothing to do with any of the prosecutions against him, according to any evidence that's been presented at all. There's been no reporting on that at all. First of all, the state prosecutors, of course, are not coordinating with the federal government. They have their own cases to make, Fonnie Willis in Georgia and Alvin Bragg in New York. And then Jack Smith was, as you point out, Katie, is a special counsel appointed specifically to have independence from the Biden administration. Now, of course, he does report to Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, and therefore some people will always say that fundamentally, structurally, that's a problem. But there's no evidence whatsoever that the White House or even Merrick Garland, for that matter, is determining what Jack Smith is doing in either of the two cases that he's brought against the former president. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. He's going to say it over and over again, and it'll convince a lot of people, but there's zero facts backing that up.
What's the strategy of this Trump team? Is it just to let him say whatever he wants because it was so effective in 2016, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly his strategy. I think the team is, again, as Garrett said, would prefer a little bit more discipline, has tried to impose some discipline on him with some degree of success. But, you know, he has this belief in his own ability to convince people of anything just by speaking off the cuff the way he's doing now, sort of the greatest hits of Trump world. And I think you know, you're never going to completely tame Donald Trump. That's just not in the cards. He may be more disciplined from time to time, but he is never going to be the kind of read from a script, read from a teleprompter, do everything you're told to do, disciplined kind of candidate.
When I've spoken to allies of the White House, they've said that let Donald Trump talk and voters will be reminded of the chaos. By the way, he's taking questions. We'll go if there's an interesting one. And voters will be reminded of the chaos. That's enough to put him front and center and allow us to win again, just like in 2020. Is that the strategy for this White House, for President Biden's White House regarding Donald Trump?
Well, I think that they think that Donald Trump is their best ally, in effect, in this race, right? That the more people hear what Trump says, the more they will be reminded of why they voted against him in 2020. Biden's problem right now is not that he is necessarily losing a lot of voters to Trump. His problem is that he's just losing voters who were for him in 2020 but are kind of disappointed right now, either because of inflation or the border or his age or what have you. Some of them have gone to Trump, but for the most part, they're just not voting or thinking about third-party candidates. And his path to victory is to win back that coalition that he had in 2020. And the way to win them back is to remind them why they voted against former President Trump. And every time Trump gets out there and says some of these things that are particularly, you know, radical or unfounded or, you know, wild sounding, the Biden people believe it helps them.
Are they confident those voters will come back to them in the, you know, last few weeks, maybe last couple months of this campaign, Peter?
That's the argument, right, is that most Americans aren't really paying attention to this right now, and that therefore, you know, they haven't really been forced to make that choice, to make that decision and realize that, yeah, whatever they're upset about Biden, in the end, not voting for him or voting against him or voting for a third-party candidate means that Trump comes back. And the Biden people feel that come the fall, when the votes actually come in, when people have to actually make the decision, who are not paying attention now, they will remember what it was they didn't like about the 4 years of Trump. Remember, he was the most unpopular president before we got to this one, and we'll go back to Biden, however reluctantly.
Garrett, what about that strategy potentially from this White House, that Donald Trump is the best ally for Democrats coming out and talking? Does the campaign see him just coming out and talking, doing what he's doing right now do they see it as a benefit? Do they see it as a problem?